Good evening. My name is Wallace Bradley, and I'm the host of the Bradley Report, and I'm also the president of United in Peace, Inc. We got a very interesting show, but first off, I want to tell my wife, happy anniversary. So everybody that missed me stepping on Friday the 13th, know that I was being about the business known as the honeydew list. We got a very interesting show, powerful show. It's global, it's national, and it's local. Our president is on his way to Israel, even though they had a bombing of a hospital in the Gaza Strip. Our mayor makes a decision that is wise for him to stay in the city of Chicago to handle the citizens' business, their problem with the homeless and with the migrants. And we still do not have a Speaker of the United States Congress. So without further ado, let me say to God be the glory, to me and you. Let's go with the first piece, and that is, there's no Speaker in the House.
And those responding to their names will indicate by surname the nominee of their choosing. The reading clerk will now call the roll.
Adams. Jeffries. Adderholt. Jordan. Babin. Jordan. Bacon. McCarthy. Baird.
There it
Jordan.
is. That was Congressman Don Bacon, Republican of
Balderson.
Nebraska, as anticipated, not voting present,
Jordan.
voting for Kevin McCarthy. That is not what Jim Jordan and the Jordan forces wanted him to do. They wanted him to vote present, but instead he voted for McCarthy. So that is essentially a no vote on Jordan. The next one we're listening for is Congresswoman Chavez DeRemer from Oregon. She represents a district that President Biden won by
Castor
9 points.
Of Florida.
Let's listen in.
Jeffries. Castro of Texas. Jeffries. Chavez DeRemer. McCarthy.
Congresswoman Chavez DeRemer of Oregon, representing a district that President Biden won by 9 points, voted for McCarthy. That is basically 2 votes against Jordan. He can only afford to lose one more.
D'Esposito. Zelton. Diaz-Balart. Scalise.
So, with that vote for Steve Scalise from Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida, and the unusual vote from Congressman Anthony D'Esposito from New York for former Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York, who ran and lost a race for governor, that is 4 House Republican votes against Jim Jordan, which means Jim Jordan will not win the speakership on this vote. Now, whether that means, unless they change their votes, which will mean, again, unless they change their votes, that he will not win the speakership. Now, whether he wins in a subsequent vote could happen. That's what happened with McCarthy. It also could happen, as what happened with Steve Scalise behind closed doors, that he could find his votes eroding.
Jimenez. McCarthy.
Okay, John King, I'm sorry, but that's 7 House Republicans.
And so if you have to get that number to 2, if everybody keeps voting, and Jim Jordan has to get the number, not voting for him, to 2, can he negotiate? Does he have the leverage to negotiate? How many times is he willing to take the hit? Kevin McCarthy, frankly, forgive me, humiliated himself by staying out there and out there and out there, and finally wore them down by cutting deals. The fact that we're having this vote today is because he cut those deals. He gave so much leverage to the rank and file that he was not an effective leader. So can Jim Jordan get himself in the McCarthy box and negotiate his way to that gavel? Now it's up to 8. If the answer is yes, and that's a big if, capital I, capital F, bold-face it, and underline it. If, what does he have to give up to get there, and how much power or authority does he have? But he called for this vote. This was his idea. This was his play under the idea that I'm going to lose the first one, and then I'm going to win them over.
Got it out.
I'm going to wear them down. So we will. A speaker has to run the House. A speaker has to be a legislative tactician. This is Jim Jordan's strategy and tactic. We'll see if he's any good at it.
Who was the eighth? Who was
Tony
the
Gonzalez.
Tony Gonzalez from Texas.
For Scalise.
He voted for Scalise, so that was one that what we weren't even looking for.
Jeffries. Jeffries. Jordan. Jordan. LaTurner. Jordan. Lawler.
Speaker Kevin
McCarthy.
McCarthy.
Scalise.
Jim Jordan.
Jordan.
As we watch the House floor and as we watch these not Jordan votes numbers climb to 14 now, I'm getting some texts, and I don't know what you all are hearing. I got a text from a former Republican who said, a former House Republican who has been in situations like this, who said, you know, if it was just a handful, maybe Jordan can do it, but it looks so much harder now as the numbers go up. Ashley, I know that could be the case, but again, people could be looking at this and saying, I'm just going to vote the way I want to right now. But a lot of these members that we're talking about are Republicans who people in your party, in the Democratic Party, think that they can beat and take the majority back in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, if this number was a handful, I would feel better probably as Jim Jordan, but this is much larger than I think anyone has suspected. And it is a presidential year, and we were talking earlier about in midterms, a vote like this, some folks in their campaign could think it would really matter. But here's the one thing, in those 18 districts that Biden won but are held by Republican congresspeople, some of those are in states where you don't run very large presidential campaigns, like a New York, like a California.
Or
Nebraska.
Yeah.
And so when you are thinking, my constituents aren't going to be focusing so much on the presidential because my state is a really red state, but my district is purple, and I need to make sure that I don't get a campaign ad run against me in a moderate district where I voted for someone like Jim Jordan, who is the founder of the Freedom Caucus, is an election denier, and is always on Fox News pushing MAGA talking points.
And I just want to add that Mike Simpson just voted for Scalise, which is a bit of a surprise, Scott.
Yeah, the number keeps climbing, and so I think, interestingly, by the way, when we did this with McCarthy, they had to go on it, and they had to keep doing it because the Constitution requires it. In this case, there is no requirement they stay here and do this over and over and over again. So I'm actually really sort of fascinated now. If you're Jordan, is the strategic move for you here to go for another one and see if anybody peels off, or is it to go to a meeting?
Okay, so the opposition to Jim Jordan picked up 4 votes there. He had 16 originally, and then in the absent votes, Congressman Ken Buck voted for Tom Emmer. Congressman John James of Michigan voted for Tom Cole. And Victoria Spartz and Congressman LaMalfa all voted for candidates other than Jim Jordan. That's 20 no votes on Jordan. Adam Kinzinger, David Chalian was making this observation earlier, which is what we seem to be hearing very much in a loud voice is from these 20 congressmen is, please do not make Jim Jordan the symbol of the House Republicans.
Yeah, that's correct. Look, I'm impressed that there's 20. I was worried this morning because a lot of the hard opposition to Jordan had been capitulating in the last 24 hours. I think of like Mike Rogers from Alabama, Ann Wagner from Missouri. They were hell no's until they were all in. This is embarrassing for Jim Jordan. And I think this is going to be hard for him to fix. I mean, the only thing I can imagine is if he starts cutting deals, and those deals include things that he's never supported in the past. For instance, if he says, I'm committed to bringing Ukraine funding on the floor, he may be able to peel off one or two of those. If he says, I'm committed to whatever it is, I don't know, maybe he can get to his number, but I think this is hard. I think the free vote here, I mean, you know, the easiest thing to do if you're a Republican is to vote for Jim Jordan the first time and then go away the second time. So I think you could see even more peel away on the second round, or he consolidates. Who really knows? But I think it's going to be very hard for him to become speaker now. But that doesn't mean they are not going to use blistering pressure on Fox News, Newsmax, all those OAN to activate the base to scare the crap out of these people. But there are a lot of brave people in those 20 that I'm very proud of today.
The tellers agree in their tallies that the total number of votes cast is 432, of which the Honorable Jim Jordan of the state of Ohio has received 200 votes. The Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 212 votes. The Honorable Kevin McCarthy of the state of California has received 6 votes. Lee Zeldin of the state of New York has received 3. The Honorable Steve Scalise of the state of Louisiana has received 7. The Honorable Mike Garcia of the state of California has received 1. The Honorable Tom Emmer of the state of Minnesota has received 1. The Honorable Tom Cole of the state of Oklahoma has received 1. The Honorable Thomas Massey of the state of Kentucky has received 1. No person having received a majority of the whole number of votes cast by surname, a speaker has not been elected.
It's wild. They don't want Jordan because they know Trump is pulling his string. They also know that Jordan and Trump were in the conspiracy to help create the attack on the Capitol. But there need to be a speaker in the House in order for them to do what's right by aiding and assisting Israel and Ukraine and making sure the government don't shut down. From what I heard in the news, the reason that Hamas was able to attack Israel is because it was like everyone would sleep at the wheel as far as security. Because Netanyahu was trying to get rid of the Supreme Court, and you had Jewish people protesting against Jewish people. But our president is going over to Israel to show that he's 100% behind Israel. And then we got a mayor that stands in Chicago. So could you hit that piece with the mayor stand in Chicago?
At this time, but will send a delegation from Chicago. That group hoping to not only learn more about the migrant crisis, but also warn those coming to Chicago about winter's harsh weather conditions. Our political reporter, Marianne Ahern, is here now and has the very latest. Marianne.
Stephen, there were critics who said that the mayor's trip was just merely a photo opportunity. His team suggests he still may go at some point, but there is still enough on his plate, more than enough on his plate, so he will not be traveling to Texas now.
I am going to the border as soon as possible.
Less than 2 weeks ago, Mayor Brandon Johnson announced he would travel to the Texas border to see for himself the crisis that has brought more than 18,500 migrants here. Today, he's changed his mind. Senior advisor Jason Lee.
So what we're doing is we're sending a small delegation to begin some preliminary conversations with local stakeholders there who are responsible for transit.
A smaller Chicago delegation will go later this week to visit 4 Texas cities: El Paso, San Antonio, McAllen, and Brownsville. Alderman William Hall will join the group.
Well, I need to know where they're coming in, how they're moving to and from Chicago, who's all involved.
The delegation looks to inform the migrants and those coordinating where the migrants are sent what the weather conditions will soon be like here.
We also need to communicate accurately what's happening in Chicago. The housing situation is becoming critical. The weather is becoming colder. We need to make sure our stakeholders on the border understand that dynamic as they're advising migrants on their next options.
I think it does make sense to make sure that as the migrants are making their decisions, they understand what Chicago's going to feel like. And it's less about pushing people away and more about the environment they're going to be facing out here in the cold if they come.
Meanwhile, this huge vacant lot at 38th and California in Brighton Park, it is being evaluated to perhaps house 3,500 migrants in a newly built tent city. There's already work being done here to level the land.
The fact is that having 3-year-olds sleeping on the floor of police stations is unconscionable. As a city, we can't allow for that. If that means putting up tents, we've got to do that.
The city has not yet formally announced the Brighton Park location, and the alderman there promises to update the residents when she learns more. Allison?
Thank you, Marianne.
You know, my time is about to be short, but it's something I want my viewing audience to hear from the President of the United States explaining why he's going over to Israel. Could you hit that piece for me?
Clear, as he's done unequivocally since Hamas's slaughter of more than 1,400 people, including at least 30 Americans, that Israel has the right and indeed the duty to defend its people from Hamas and other terrorists and to prevent future attacks. The President will hear from Israel what it needs to defend its people as we continue to work with Congress to meet those needs. Second, President Biden will underscore our crystal clear message to any actor, state or non-state, trying to take advantage of this crisis to attack Israel. Don't. To that end, he's deployed 2 aircraft carrier groups and other military assets to the region. Third, the President will continue to coordinate closely with our Israeli partners to secure the release of hostages taken by Hamas, including men, women, small children, Holocaust survivors, and American citizens, as an indispensable humanitarian effort. Fourth, President Biden will receive a comprehensive brief on Israel's war aims and strategy. Fifth, the President will hear from Israel how it will conduct its operations in a way that minimizes civilian casualties and enables humanitarian assistance to flow to civilians in Gaza in a way that does not benefit Hamas. To that end, today, and at our request, the United States and Israel have agreed to develop a plan that will enable humanitarian aid from donor nations and multilateral organizations to reach civilians in Gaza, and them alone, including the possibility of creating areas to help keep civilians out of harm's way. It is critical that aid begin flowing into Gaza as soon as possible. We share Israel's concern that Hamas may seize or destroy aid entering Gaza or otherwise preventing it from reaching the people who need it. If Hamas in any way blocks humanitarian assistance from reaching civilians, including by seizing the aid itself, we'll be the first to condemn it, and we will work to prevent it from happening again. We welcome the government of Israel's commitment to work on this plan. The President very much looks forward to discussing it further when he's here on Wednesday.
The judge overseeing
terrorism, be it domestic terrorism, be it urban terrorism, be it global terrorism. And as you know, I'm one that believes we got to have community law in order to have community safety. As you know, community law is zero tolerance for senseless violence, shootings, and killings. The abuse and the rape of women and children. Zero tolerance for the robbing and the abuse of our elders and seniors. Hate is a hell of a thing, and all three of those stories, you had hate in the United States Senate to the point you got three different factions of Republicans that's fighting against one another because they do not want to do anything with the Democratic Party. They're willing to shut this country down. Hate. Hate brought about the violence that's happening over there in the Middle East to the point that Hamas attacked Israel and the majority of the Palestinians wasn't in on the planet. Yet, because of hate, they're feeling the pain as well as Israel is feeling the pain. The migrants that's here, this is what I feel that our mayor in the city of Chicago, as well as the governor of the state of Illinois, the mayor's law department, and the attorney general that we elected in Illinois need to come together or find some way, or the various leaders in the city of Chicago, be they ministers or whatever it is, they all need to file an emergency injunction against the governor of Texas for sending migrants here to Chicago to cause chaos in the city of Chicago, in New York, in California, and all of the 10 states that are blue states to cause chaos. You make it possible for someone that's against humanity and democracy to create a terrorist act because of targeted chaos from a Republican governor that a lot of people feel he should be charged with human trafficking because his purpose is political and to create chaos. I just want to say, Father God, forgive all of us for our sins, and I pray that you continue to bless us with your mercy and grace and a hedge of protection around all of us. So to God be the glory. That's Gator's story. Thank you.